by understanding the anatomy of story, it's not this very difficult thing to learn. There is a structured anatomy. I can say it real quick. In Act 1, and there's like 5-act, 7-act, 9-act structures, but really there's only 3 acts.
And you're talking about this is pervading all of society.
All of reality.
All of reality. Okay.
All of reality.
Got it.
And so when a story starts, there's an inciting incident.
Mm-hmm.
This is what induces, in neuro and hero mythology, hero mythology, the hero is always set off on a path. That is the dopamine pathway. There's a reward at the end of it. The dopamine is not there, and this is proven scientifically, in order to make the reward feel good. It dies off right before you get the reward. It's there to get you there. It propels you towards the reward. So there's an inciting incident. It always has to happen at the beginning. That's what sets the story in motion, which comes with a problem that needs resolved, a transformation. Then there's an Act 1 climax. At that point, that's where we know about the ring and we know about Frodo, but where do they become entwined, where they are now bound in the Act 1 climax? That is when Frodo realizes, come on, take it, Gandalf. And he can't. Why? Because he would be tempted. The men would be tempted. Only I can do this little guy. That's when he knows, I have to do the most dangerous thing in the world because nobody else can be trusted to do it. So he's altruistic enough to where he does it. That's Act 1 climax. He knows he and the problem are bound. He needs to solve this. Now you move into Act 2. You have 3 what are called pinch points. There's pinch point, midpoint, pinch point 2. Pinch point 1 is where the hero is attempting the goal, attempting to move towards it, but then there's resistance, but they don't see the new belief, the new self they're going to need to bring to bear. They don't see it yet. Midpoint is when they start to see the belief, but it's such an infantile state, they don't know what to do with it. They just realize, oh, I can't bring the old me to solve this new problem. Pinch point 2, which is right before the all is lost moment, is when they see, I cannot use the old me. This is the only way forward, the new me. And the all is lost moment is where, oh, and by the way, dopamine, norepinephrine, Act 1. Act 2, you're cycling off of dopamine, norepinephrine into serotonin, oxytocin, bonding and feeling content with what we have. Going back and forth between those two in the midpoint, pinch point, pinch point 2. The all is lost moment is where you just stop it flat and you show that the hero is dead. It's almost like dead, gone, like there's no hope. That's why they call it all is lost. They have to mine something that was unexpected and inside them that they always had, but that they never knew, and they had to be beaten to a pulp in order to find it. And then from that place, with this new spark, there's a new kind of dopamine and norepinephrine launching you towards the climax, which is where it comes to a head. The major transformation of the hero happens. There's one irreversible transformation that all stories have. And then you need to resolve it afterwards. And that's where the oxytocin explosion comes back in. You feel bonded with the characters. The serotonin makes you feel, this is mine. Like, even though this is a film, I'm here with you anthro-ontologically. I feel it in my body. And the resolution has to show you the new normal of the next chapter. If it doesn't, then you're wiping your eyes, like all the tears, and it just kind of left you in that moment. It has to resolve, bring you back home. So you're like, this is the new normal after the transformation.
Yeah.
That explains more than just stories that you can tell in language. That is finding an attraction to somebody. You have this dopamine and almost like adrenaline, like I need to do it now. I need to go talk. I'm nervous. I need to go. And then you realize, she's not into my cheesy pickup lines. I can't bring my old self to solve this problem. Let me get real vulnerable and raw with you. And that's like all is lost. And like
it's very challenging to do that.
Very challenging, but you meet on the field of value. And then you have this together moment, an intimate moment. What I laid out as the architecture of film and story, it's laden in every moment. Mm-hmm. At some point, it feels like source code. You could just see the code. I know what act we're in. I know what role you're playing. I know how it's supposed to shift, even as a society. And I think right now, moving towards 2030, we are moving into Act 3. I think we're not even there yet. We're not. Maybe we hit that all is lost moment. But I think we're just at the point where we're starting to realize we can't bring our old selves to solve this new problem,
Right.
that there's a new element, a new X factor. And we're moving into Act 3, and that may take 20 years, all the way up to, 2050. But when you start seeing the fundamentals of story, it starts making sense of things in multiple different ways. Now, the only thing I'll say as a caveat is don't think you're right when you apply this to the world. When you apply these story elements to the world, you can be so arrogant that you can think, oh, I'm right. This person's playing the trickster. This one over here is doing that. And once you start thinking you're fully right, you don't realize how you're wrong. And in that incompleteness, they will even subconsciously push back.
Well, this is the thing too, right? Like, let's say even you are totally right at this given point in time, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reality is we have our individual stories, we have our family stories, or even just our interrelationship stories. We have, even within us as individuals, our personal life stories versus our public stories versus our job stories. Then we have our family, extended family stories. Then we have our community stories. Then we have our region stories. Then we have our social group stories, which may be all around the earth. You and I are both connected with people across the earth right now that are all part of this community, whatever we want to call it. But there are ever evolving, overlapping stories that influence each other. So even if you are right at a given moment in time, that story may completely evolve, and you can't know. And this relates to God as well. I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but when it comes to the crafting of this story that we're in, let's say that we are at touch points with, you could say, of these so-called nefarious actors that are setting forth these agendas, Agenda 2030, all these things. We can't know exactly what the agenda is. Take the agenda like a painting. We can only point to aspects of the painting and say what we think it might be.
Yeah.
Unless you are in the mind of the painter, you can never truly know what the intention of the painting is, unless you get revelation from that painter. That applies to God as it pertains to reality. It applies to this when it comes to anyone who's creating anything or crafting a narrative or a story. So with all that being said, how do we, in the age of the internet, when there are so many stories being told right now, everyone has the ability to tell stories. Everyone has the ability to pontificate on what they think the evolving story is. How do we find our center and make sure that we're crafting our own story?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As I said, I think, I don't think I sense that story is how we find ourselves in that interior, albeit invisible, but very real landscape. So finding self is also by the forces of antagonism. So the story that everybody else is caught in, it will impress itself upon us. And for me to find myself, I needed to be pressed up against, I never wanted to do the social media thing. I really resisted it a long, long time, until I also recognized that I was only attributing to it the negative things that I saw from my limited worldview. And then once I saw, oh my God, there's so much beauty that can come with this, I was limited in my mind to think that only evil can come from this. No, it's like saying a hammer, oh, you can only crack skulls with it. No, you can build houses. You can do beautiful stuff with it. And so for us to identify our own story, it does take a little bit of understanding the context of the story that the world, your family, your circles of influence are stuck in. Because what you're really doing is you're bringing your uniqueness and your unique gifts into their world. And I think oftentimes what people try to do, especially that I know, this is the part of me that it's the reason why I never got into film for conspiracy. I use that as a tool to impact people deeply so they can find who they are, where they are. So I know that sometimes, like my parents, they are in a certain story, but it's not my job to get so arrogant that I'm supposed to try and rip them out of their story every single time I see them. I find them in their story now. I meet them there. And you could say, well, that's kind of like being an amoeba or, an enigma. You're not being real. And I'm like, at the core of it, None of us are an archetype. We display archetypes. None of us are a character trait. We display them. We are infinite. However, I have very real values. If I try and violate them, I beat myself up. So there is a realness to that, but it's in an invisible realm. It's symbolic. And like in film, you can say things on the nose, but the best way to do it is symbolically, even with just the setting that you're in. Like in some films, just the way you contrast, like in Furiosa, Charlize Theron, she's got 3 beautiful young maidens in white dress, and they're holding a light, and they're all glowing orange and red, but she is keeping a lookout. She's more in her masculine because she's protecting them, and she's all in dark, cold blue of the desert night. And that's a way of telling the story. She has to step into her masculine in the dark, in these dark shadow aspects of life, to protect the purity and the virginity. Not just virgins, not 3 virgins holding a light, purity and virginity. Yeah. This is an eternal part of story. And you tell these things with the way you contrast, the way you light, the way you go from black and white back to color. All those things, they matter. And you could say it's all just really abstract and you make of it what you will, but why does it work?
Yeah.
Because there is a substance to it. Right. There is something underlying it.